All right, so today I want to talk a little bit about AI, and well, I'm always talking about AI. Um, but I just ran into an issue where, like, contrary to popular belief, like I actually use AI. I use AI a lot. I was recently using it for coding, and I actually stopped doing that. The primary reason why I stopped using it for coding, it's not because it's bad, but with coding is a lot more than just getting some tool to generate some garbage for you to use and build a website and build an application. Um, it's good for like in the short run, like I need to hurry up and download some information from a website. I needed to have some sort of what do you call it, a scraper, and I don't feel like going through and writing the whole beautiful soup code myself, and I can get AI to generate that for me. That's fine. It's a one-time use thing. Get it, run it, and then probably never use that code again. And in reality, if you're ever going to actually build some sort of system, you're not going to want to use AI to generate a bunch of garbage for you that one, you haven't written yourself, you haven't reviewed it, you haven't looked over it. Two, you have no idea how it's going to break. And even though you can expect AI to write out the test cases for you and build out proper infrastructure, the one of the biggest hiccups in software development is actually understanding why something broke. And whenever you bring someone new, like an intern, onto your project, the first half of their year there is understanding your code base. And every time I interned somewhere, or anytime we hired interns and I had to train interns, we had to spend a lot of time just letting them sit down, read through the code. And I've done this myself where I had to sit down, read through huge code bases in order to find, like, being an extra pair of eyes, being able to find particular bugs in the code, in the software, that other engineers, other developers kind of gleaned over or skipped over, missed over. It's like this idea of being able to add diversity to your project and being able to look at your code and say, "Hey, this is where I think it's breaking," and then you can have an actual discussion about it. And nowadays, you can actually use AI for that. You can pass your code through AI and have it review it. But if you're going to lose that muscle memory of being able to write your own code, read it, and understand it, then at some point you're just going to relinquish control to the AI. And there's one reference that I like to point back to. We've done this before, and it's a case study for ethical AI where you look at the the recidivism rates for criminals. If you're going to release criminals, you're going to go through a whole process in the prison with the judge, reviewing your case, reviewing if you've been remediated or not, and trying to make a professional, ethical discernment on whether or not a person should be released from prison early on bond or sent into whatever kind of situation, or just leave them in the prison to keep them out of society. And I forgot the name of the company, but they it might have been Clearview or something like that, but I can't remember what it's actually called. They wrote software, AI software, that a judge was using to try to discern between whether or not a person should be released or not. This judge had a lot of years of experience, and at some point the judge was starting to look at what the AI was outputting, and it was start he that judge was leaning more towards allowing the AI to make the decision on their own, picking up that cognitive load. And there was cases where that judge would make a certain decision but went a different way because the AI had suggested it. And what they didn't account for was that the AI itself was racist and biased, and anytime a black person was presented, majority of the time it would just say to keep them in prison, and anytime a white person was brought up, it would tell them to go ahead and release the person more times out of not. And it actually resulted in a case of a first-time offender black woman picked up and convicted of shoplifting, that when it came up to review whether or not to release her to the public, the AI had suggested she was dangerous. Then it came to a white man who was convicted of murder, who had a violent history, a very long rap sheet, that the AI was more predisposed to say release him, and the judge released him, and that guy went out and killed a person within the same week. And you might be wondering, like, all right, well, we can just fix the biases and make the AI more smart and make the AI more accurate. But the point that I'm actually trying to make is that when you use AI as a tool and you're not well trained and well versed on how to be using it correctly, then you're going to just fall into the trap of saying, hey, let the AI do everything. And you may think, I've been doing this for years, and now I've got this great tool that can turn around and do everything for me. And now I don't have to worry too much about it. I can hurry up and get my job done, go home and have dinner and still get paid the same amount. Meanwhile, what your boss is sitting there saying is, well, why do I need you if you're just going to let the AI do everything? I can just let the AI do it all. And I've seen a lot of people make the statement that AI is going to replace all the coders, is going to replace everybody in their jobs. And there was a recent paper released where they were trying to show, here's the coverage that AI currently has, and here's the theoretical coverage that AI could have. And investors should be focusing more on trying to fill AI's role in these particular locations and say that we can replace all these jobs and bring on this utopia where nobody has a job. And if you've ever been poor before, struggling to try to get hours, you know that it's actually a very bad idea for people to not have jobs in a society that is explicitly built on the back of labor, built on the back of the expectation that you will have to go somewhere to earn your living. We're not in a communist society right now, as much as I would want us to be in. There is no let's fire everybody and live a happy life right now. So when you're talking about laying people off, you're objectively talking about killing people. And when you're talking about laying off professionals who have had decades of experience, have a surmounted amount of debt associated with education. You're talking about laying off people who, yeah, they make a lot of money, but their house is extremely expensive. Their cost of living is extremely expensive. For a lot of people, like in my own family who don't have much, when I try to explain to them like making $100K a year was kind of like poverty back during COVID, they were all laughing at me. They're saying, oh, no, that's, you guys just don't know how to spend your money right. And I'm like, dude, I came from poverty. I know what it's like. And when you're making a lot of money compared to poverty, it seems like, how could you not get by making $100K a year? But well, think about how many bills you got to take on, what kind of location you got to live in order to have these types of jobs. And now these types of jobs that required you to live in a very high wealth, high expense situation, having a mortgage, having education expenses, having health expenses, and now they're trying to tell you, we don't need you. You go find another job for half your income, and you'll figure out how to get by on lower income while we're going to replace you by bots. And these bots are not fully capable of doing the job they claim they can. And it's a lot of it. It's a lot of shit. There's a lot of problems with this particular setup. And no matter how you look at it, the only positive that really comes out of this is that it might be improving the workflow of some professional out there. It might actually be doing a heavy lift job, such as when I use it, I can make it hurry up and create a website scraper for me. That's great, but what's the cost of all this? And the point that I wanted to try to make today is like, since I use AI, I don't just rely on like Google or the free stuff. I'm actually paying for a yearly subscription that's like $100. And even though I'm unemployed, I'm getting disability, I can actually afford $100 a year to make use of AI. And I'm using duck.ai. I'm using, it's supposed to be a privacy oriented AI that allows you to select from a multitude of models. But the problem is like AI right now is not profitable. You're not turning a profit using AI. It's very costly to actually train AI models. AI models require huge data centers to train right now due to the scaling law. And we'll get into that later, where there's like Andrew Ng, Jan LeCun, and Gary Marcus. Well, obviously he's been saying it, but a lot of these professional giants in this industry, the people that help build the AI to get to where we're at now, are actually telling us a scaling law might be dying, it might be dead soon, and these companies are actually trying to use different techniques other than scaling, because when they jumped from GPT-3 to GPT-4, it was very, very huge, very large amount of performance gained by the scaling law, but when they went from GPT-4 to GPT-5, there was very negligible increase in performance. It's running off of an exponential growth model that's unsustainable. And right now, they're going to build a data center close to my house in order to supplement this bullshit and try to tell us that it's not for AI when I know damn well that they're using it for AI scraping, or I mean, AI training, and as well as AI inference for whenever people are spitting up these models and using them. It's all very costly, it's all very expensive, and when our AI companies are not chasing after the lottery ticket hypothesis, instead they're chasing after the scaling law, then they're not making the models any more efficient, they're not making them smaller and easier to use, they're not focusing on recognizing whether or not the problem they're trying to tackle is too big, because they were trying to chase AGI. And chasing AGI was a pipe dream. We're years off from that. We haven't even fixed catastrophic forgetfulness. We haven't fixed continuous learning. You haven't fixed the ability to keep an AI on training continuously the way that a human brain would work, and the way any kind of organism would work. This idea of we're going to train once and you lock it and then hope that it runs on everything correctly, and then it extrapolates to some bullshit that results in hallucinations, and we got to sit here and pretend that that was AGI, and in reality, it's not. But that's neither here nor there. The whole point is that this idea of making your model bigger and bigger and bigger is dying, and rather than like own up to this fact, a lot of companies are still trying to chase the hype, trying to reformat it in a different way, but they're also doing something. Since AI is not profitable itself, they're locking it down. And like I said, I pay $100 or so a year to duck that AI, which is supposed to allow me access to things like Claude, GPT, Grok, and whatnot. I would never use Grok. I think it's a CSAM generator, and it's probably been trained on data stolen from the government. So there's probably a lot of classified information within Grok that anyone could have access to. And if you put in the right prompts, you could probably get people's classified information, their sensitive information. I'm very familiar with this sort of, my background was understanding like adversarial AI, understanding trusted AI. So I've read like thousands of papers on this subject, not necessarily for large language models, not necessarily for stable diffusion, but I am familiar that with a deep neural network, you are actually capable of extracting information out of it if you know how to attack it, which is probably one of the reasons why they like to hide their models and no longer make them freely available for the public to download. Like academia, back in the day, we download ResNet, we download YOLO, and we test the hell out of it to see how it breaks. Right now, you can't download like ChatGPT's model and probe it. You can't download Grok's model and probe it. But you know what can happen is an adversarial hacker could probably theoretically hack into one of these sites and steal their model. It could potentially happen. It may be happening now as we speak. It may have already happened. It may have been some researcher that was able to put in a backdoor tunnel and allow access without anybody recognizing. There's a lot of security risks behind software and stuff like AI that I think a lot of people kind of hand wave on and say that's already solved, when we know it's solved probabilistically. Like you have a 99.999% chance it's not going to happen, but that 0.0000001% chance of it actually happening could be enough that if it happens, it's catastrophic. The whole risk versus reward situation. But going back to what I was trying to say, I keep sidetracking. I'm going on all these side quests, but what I was trying to say is, if you become heavily reliant on accessing AI to write your code, you lose muscle memory and the understanding of what your code's doing. Something that can happen is when these companies realize they're not making profit, that they've already locked you into using their service, well, now they can make you pay for it. And it's not the same thing as like, oh, you pay $100 a year to access it. No, it could be more like you pay $3,000 a month, or else our AI just doesn't generate code for you, or we're gonna lock you out. And what happened to me just now is like I said, I stopped using it to generate code. I like to use it as like, let's spitball some ideas. Let's go back and forth. I challenge you, you challenge me. Um, when you make the AI go and look up information, it takes away a lot of tokens because it's got to parse all that HTML, parse a bunch of data, and adds to the token space. And at some point, I max out not just the amount of tokens that I've used, but they also have introduced this thing where I've used too many messages. So I've been implementing techniques to try to like, don't make it go back and look up information. Let me tell you what I know and parse it from there, or I'll let you look up this certain amount of information and then try to keep your verbosity low so we can make sure not to overuse the token space. And then next thing I know, I'm getting capped out from actually asking prompts. So I have a max number of prompts I can use, which is not disclosed by Duck.ai. And when I was early looking into things like Claude, looking at Anthropic was supposed to be the more ethical AI out there. And they do use the constitutional model, and they try to use a more human-centric approach to it, which people are finding more optimal, despite the fact it was used in military targeting and it was used to kill people. So it still is an unethical company. But from my own standpoint, it was unethical simply because they were able to, when you paid for it, you got more access, but they didn't tell you how much more access, right? That's unethical. So you don't know what you're paying for. You're just paying for more. What does that mean? More could change per day. So you're in agreement to a contract that maybe more means you get 2 more prompts than a free version. Maybe it means you get 100 times more prompts than a free version. We don't know. They don't tell you. That's unethical. And right now I face that issue with Duck.ai, where not only does it block me from using one model, it blocks me from using all models for like a whole day. There is no limiter, there is no specification on how much this blockage is, what can I do to avoid it, what can I do to expect it, what can I do to plan for it, and I'm actually paying for this service. It's not free. I'm paying $100 a year, but apparently I'm still another plebe who has to adhere to some sort of rule, some sort of cap that they won't disclose what the cap is. So when I talk about AI, part of it, I'm not anti-AI. I'm not about blocking AI. I'm anti this bullshit. We're going to build a model. It's going to be too big for you to understand. It's going to be too big for you to dive into and say, this is how it breaks. It's very antithetical to my entire work in trusted AI. But also, like, we're going to block access. And this idea of not only can you not download and understand how it's working, but we can actually just say you can't use it today. And to me, with my understanding of capitalism, which I did the grind movement. I did the work from day to night, work from morning to night, push yourself, push, get in shape, get healthy, and just be a nonstop worker. And I'm not even 40 yet, and I'm burned out. I've been burned out for the past 2 or 3 years. I've honestly been burned out since 2018. But what happens is when you're in that grind set mindset, you push through the burnout and make it worse. It gets to the point that you become unhealthy, physically unhealthy. You break things in your body. And then when you're in your 40s, late 30s, 40s, you can no longer do your regular job. And it's not just an aging aspect, because I found that when I take a step back and I rest and I don't push myself this way, and like I said, I am getting disability, that I can actually recharge myself and go back into that hard charge moment. The problem is I just burn myself out again. So I can still do my job, I can still work. I just have this inability to stop myself from pushing too hard. And that's what capitalism does, is it likes to convince you that this is an individualistic problem. If you're not working hard, you're lazy, which is a lie. And at some point, it's going to exploit you to the point that we're going to give you a bunch of wealth up front, hurry up and do this work, and then, oh, sorry, now you're sick, now you're burnt out. Well, that's a you problem. And then they're going to point to everybody else like, hey, this guy don't do what this guy did. That guy, he messed up. You're going to be different. It's going to be different for you. And then you're going to get burned out. And I'm serving more as a warning, which is why I've actually became socialist. That's why I am a socialist now, and I am a card carrying DSA member. I try to work within the chapter, but we're not going to talk about that now. There is some weird shit that happens in leftist communities, but I have an understanding that everybody is capable of putting in some amount of work. It doesn't need to be the same exact amount of work as everybody else. I read Animal Farm when I was young, and I got it beat into me like, don't be Wilbur, don't be the horse, or whatever the horse's name was. Like, everyone's gonna, in communism, everybody will ride the horse and everyone will be the pigs in there sucking. Like, there's a whole misunderstanding of what Animal Farm was actually talking about, and I need to read it again and redigest it again just to understand what was actually the point that was actually being made, because that's not actually how, like, capitalism is actually where shit like that actually happens. Your boss is not doing a bunch of work, is he? He's sitting on his fat ass, has a bunch of properties, making wealth for himself, coming in probably 2 or 3 hours for the day to tell you what you should be doing, and then going home, um, while you and all the managers above you are like locking in meeting after meeting after meeting, just completely taking up your free time to the point that maybe you got to stay a bit late and work from 5 to 7 or 5 to 9 or whatever to just get your extra work, your actual work done. Like, how many, we used to joke about it where I worked, where like you come in for a 9 to 5 day and you actually only did 15 minutes of real work. The rest of it was meetings and you context switching from one thing to the next, and not actually being able to get your task done. And it makes some sense when you're on one project, but when you're at a company that has you on like 3 or 4 different projects, which is what happened to me, it's impossible to do any fucking thing in that project except to sit in a meeting and bloviate about how special you guys are for working on it rather than getting the work done. And then when the project fails, everyone pats your back and says, well, we learned better this time. We'll try again next time. It's like, no, you didn't learn shit. You just fucking extracted all my free time, paid me a bunch of money for it, and now I'm burned out from even going through this bullshit. And this is that bullshit that they're trying to push with AI, is like, oh, well, we can replace all of our workers. It's not really doing a lot now with AI that's doing all the work. And then we'll fire everybody and have one guy just manage the AI. And then that one person that's left is like pulling their hair out because every day they're forced to use AI to generate some fucking bullshit code that they don't even know what the code's doing. It just looks right. And now you got people bragging about, like the guy on Blue Sky. It's like, oh, all of Blue Sky is written now by Claude. I don't touch any code anymore. And it's like, we know Blue Sky's breaking, you fucking idiot. Like, we know that you're not doing your job. We know that it's not working. And doing something simple like adding an edit button that every other website could figure out how to do, you're like, oh, we can't do an edit button on Blue Sky because we don't know how that, like, we get it. You don't know how to code. We understand you have no idea how to build a system. And you want to sit there and pretend that you're better than all of us because you got Claude writing in some sort of bot format. Meanwhile, we're getting to the point now where they're going to start blocking you from even writing your code, and you're going to have to turn around and say, well, here's $3,000 a month, so please let me to keep writing this code. Because if I didn't have Claude right now, I'd be shit out of luck. I wouldn't know how to write a hello world. That's where you're getting to. You're going to lose that muscle memory for writing code. And the reason why I know that is because I started feeling like that. I was like, I don't know how to work on this project I'm building because I need to check the AI prompt to at least like make sure I'm not adding something wrong. And when you get to that point, you're trusting the AI way too much. You're that judge that has professional years of experience, but then decided to offload your work to some biased piece of shit algorithm that was making more black people stay in prison while releasing white criminals into the wild that were killing people. And I am very much adversarial to the fact that to this idea of the scaling law. I'm very adversarial to it. I've been adversarial to it since I read the paper. I've been adversarial to it since even my own professor, when I was trying to do my PhD with trusted AI, she was trying to explain to me, well, we can just get more and more data and make the model bigger and bigger and bigger, and then that should fix the accuracy issues that you're complaining about. And I was trying to explain that I wanted to work more on weight agnostic models, try to actually identify architectures and models that just work natively to the project, to the problem they're being deployed on. And in my before I got burned out, and before they split my college, and before I left it, my work was running well. Like, I had a continuous model. I spent several months tuning to the architecture for my camera, for my background, for my front yard, and well, not my front yard, my driveway. And I was able to get a particular model that I could just transfer from one camera to another and let it train on like 200 images, and it worked. Like, I didn't need a shitload of stuff. It just very small model to do anomaly detection, and I used it to identify criminals in my breaking into my neighbor's house. Like, and I let it run on a continuous learning, and that's what I was exploring, was how to do like trusted continuous learning, using regularization techniques and appropriate architecture size. I never got to publish on this shit, which pisses me off to this day. I tried to, and I want to have a whole long discussion about hyperdimensional geometry and why humans are so stuck on 3D that they can't understand like high m-dimensional spheres and such like that. That sounds like a druggie talking, but this is real. This is real stuff that I kind of want to dig into. But like, I was actively working in this field, trying to understand a high level of math for it, trying to understand better AI techniques than just scaling it. And then everybody ran with scaling their shit. And now we're at the point where your AI model is locked behind somebody's server closet, filling up an entire data center, and you can use the lottery ticket hypothesis to actually shrink it and not use an entire data center for inference. They know that. They shrink their models before they deploy them for inferencing. They just require the entire data center itself to train the damn model. And once they train it, then they can distill it, they can do dropout, they can do all these other things to shrink it, and then make inference actually fairly cheap. But due to how LLMs work, it's still an expensive process. And I forgot the name. There's a paradox that's like, if you make things more efficient to use, then it can become less efficient due to the scale of its use. People use it so much that it will be significantly more costly than if it was the inefficient version it was before. I think it's like Jensen's paradox or something like that. I forgot what it's called. You can look it up. But they're applying that to AI now, where you can make a model smaller, more scalable, cheaper to actually call and use and have the same accuracy, taking advantage of the lottery ticket hypothesis. But then now you might take your entire data center and clog it full of all these inference models. So every time someone asks GPT something or asks Claude something, they're spinning up their own smaller model, and you've got thousands of these models being spun up per day, and now they got to build all these data centers to account for all these people using it. Meanwhile, I forgot what it's called, ClaudeBot or Open Claude or something like that. Yeah, you can actually spin up either a server-based model where it's running on your Mac Mini in your house, it's running on your computer in your house, and it queries up to a big model that is in the cloud. Or it can use an older Llama or Open Claude version that still fits on a computer and have a cluster of Mac Minis that you can rely on that, right? And I've talked before about DeepSeek models. DeepSeek basically took Llama, distilled it, and made a significantly smaller model that can fit on your computer. And now it can be run as a Open Claude bot on your home network, probably not a Raspberry Pi, but definitely on a Mac Mini cluster that's bypassing the data center. So it doesn't need a fucking data center to run AI. It just runs locally on your machine. And that's kind of the point that I'm making, is like, if any of these companies, like we're starting to see like OpenAI is starting to like back out. They're starting to face issues because they're not they don't have a good profit model. And their AI is underperforming compared to other models such as like Claude. Claude's the big G right now. A lot of people quit ChatGPT because they found out that they were willing to sign a contract with the military, and they jumped onto Claude, which Claude was the one that was actually used in the military, but they at least came out and said, we don't want it. We don't want you to do that. I spent some time even like talking to the Claude bot and asking it about moral injury, about my own moral injury, but about itself and how does it feel about being used. Now, AI doesn't feel shit. I've talked about that before as well. It it's writing the manifold where if you're talking about a dark concept such as military murder, military attacks, killing people, bombing, blah blah blah, stuff like that, it's gonna have the connotation of a moral injury, of regret and pain and suffering. That that's gonna be the affect or the emotional state that's presented within the context of the text that it would be trained on. And especially if it's taking text from people like discussing it about their own moral injury and describing it, because these models are built off of like millions or billions of data points that's been scraped online, scraped from movies, scraped from actual sessions, like, and they do very well on actually replicating the original training data itself. Like that point in that cloud space, it's going to pick out that actual training point, and it's going to try to mix different points together to extrapolate something new. But due to the scaling law, it's no longer an extrapolation project, it's an interpolation. And it's trying to draw points, it's trying to draw information between distinct points, like this cloud area that there is no real understanding or mapping to it. The whole point of the AI model is to come up with its own mapping that says it's more, this is the plausible point between two training points. And we can see the reality of that when we compare it to the test set, the set that's unseen. But when you have leakage into the test set, leakage is that there's training points within the training data that get put into the test set that it looks like the test set is getting better, but in reality, you've just provided training data into the test set that the model is just saying, oh, I'm generalizing better. And it didn't generalize. It improved accuracy on the test set because it contains data points from the training set in there. And I understand this point of leakage from the aspect of like actual training data being put into, but when you're talking about data on the millions and billions amounts that's getting thrown in there, I think we need to think more about leakage as a probability distribution. The probability distribution of your training set is actually matching the probability distribution of your test set. So therefore, the more data you throw into it, obviously the more the test set's going to go up. I don't think that's actually a sign of generalization. I think what we're actually doing is leakage from the training set to the test set, which would explain why Kaplan et al. Found that scaling is actually improving the test set after a certain amount of data has actually been added, because I think at some point you're no longer testing on unseen information. You're testing on basically the same, potentially same. There's no, what I need you to prove to me that you're not actually putting into your test set replications of the training set. And I think the more and more data you add and shrink those points closer and closer together, that the more likely you're putting into the test set the actual training set. So that's why it makes sense that you might want to think more about it as a probability distribution and not so much as the points. And why would that be? Well, in a continuous distribution, what's the probability of 1 point? 0, right? So you need to have a range of points to actually come up with some sort of probability. The bigger and bigger you make your model, the more you're approaching that this probability of one of those single points existing is 0, meaning that you can no longer think of leakage itself as just a single data point. You have to think about the distribution of the probability distribution. So if you're going to make a big ass model that's trying to do everything, what you're actually doing is you're turning the extrapolation of being able to come up with two concepts and come up with a concept that's unseen. You're turning that into an interpolation problem. So the information does still exist in the test set, and you're interpolating between points, and it was able to make a good assumption from getting from one point to the other. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're extrapolating to new concepts, which is exactly why hallucinations still exist in giant models. The hallucination aspect of the model, I'll do a video later on this. I can do a short description on how I understand it. You have one particular informational manifold that exists objectively. Nobody knows what that is. You can get data that has the data can be representative of that informational space, but the data itself can contain errors or it can be misleading. There can be simple functions within the data that can replicate the informational space. So when you use models to try to learn, do data-driven models from the data to try to interpret the information space, it could be learning very simple models that are actually misrepresentations of the underlying information, or it could be learning something accurate to it. And that's why the theory behind the scaling law is that it's just getting more and more. Actually, I don't even know what their actual theory is behind it. But this idea that if you're adding more and more data, making models bigger and bigger and bigger, that is somehow being able to like extrapolate out to new concepts and actually generalize, where in a sense that it actually is learning the true fundamental theory or the actual information space. That discrepancy between what the model knows, what the model generated for its manifold of the information space versus the actual information space, that discrepancy is the hallucination. That discrepancy is where it has to fill in the void, and the void is wrong. Then you've actually created a hallucination that doesn't exist. And I think a lot of people like to describe the hallucination. They get mad about it because anthropomorphizing the idea of a model and trying to say it's got human-like qualities. But to me, a hallucination is still describing almost perfectly what these models are doing, because I need people to wrap it around their heads that what these models are doing is 100% hallucination. So there's two ways to describe it. Like the hallucination could be the discrepancy from the real world information to the model's information. Or the idea of a hallucination is just that your brain's running and it's constantly coming up with shit. It's constantly making it up. And there's a probability that what it's making up is aligned with reality. You've heard the term a broken clock is right twice a day, right? The hand's not moving, so when time comes around, it's right then, and then it comes around 12 hours later, it's right then again. Well, imagine if you've got a hand that's moving randomly a lot, right? It's just moving randomly. And every so often, your test set tests it, and it says, oh, it was right here, it was right here, it was right there. And it's just this hand that's moving in the most weird, zany, wacky way. But every time you sample it with your test set, it says it's correct. So every time you sample with your training set, sample with your test set, it works for it, right? But if you were to sample in between, it came up with some bullshit. And Gary Marcus had coined the term, I think he coined it in one of his papers. It's called pointillistic learning. And that's the idea, is that we don't really have any objective understanding of whether or not the model actually correctly learned what it was supposed to learn, right? The in-betweens beyond the test set and the training set may not be the actual function. And Kaplan et al., I think, try to prove that it was actually learning this fundamental generalization. But I have a firm belief that all you've done is you've sampled so much data, so many points, you've made the model so big that you've just made it harder to test for when it fails. So the models are still, to me, they're still 100% coming up with bullshit all the time. But the majority of times when you test it, it's factual because we've created such a huge model, such a huge cumbersome data set, that there's so many other times when it's wrong that we just can't test for those. and we only have sufficient amount of data to test for when it's right. That's my theory, and that's my theory on why the scaling law is working, and why it's not the end all be all, and why there's actually there's a better explanation for why there's diminishing returns for this, and it's mainly because when you try to think of a high dimensional reality, you got this very big folded up m-dimensional ball. The majority of the information is on the shell of the ball, not even in the center of it, nowhere near. It's very folded in such a way that if you kind of move in the wrong direction on one axis, you can end up on the complete opposite side. And that's why, in the sense of a very high m-dimensional latent space, there is no actual concept of opposite side. And if that doesn't break your brain, you're just not paying attention. And I need to do a talk on this. High dimensional math is crazy. We like to think about things in 3 dimensions. Like a 3-dimensional sphere, you can think about this side versus this side. But when you bring it up into a higher dimension, this side versus this side, wherever this camera's facing, it could actually be right next to each other along another axis. And if you project it down, it looks like they're opposite sides. But when you're actually working in the high dimensional space, they're right next to each other. And what I'm trying to say from this is that when you live in such a high dimensional reality that it's so high, it's almost better to think about it as infinitely dimensional, that it's actually highly impossible to account for every problem. It's very highly impossible. And that was the focus for decades of why we focus on narrow AI models. But the point was that people were trying to say, well, okay, I have an AI model that can detect cancer. I have an AI model that can detect blood pathogens. But what about an AI model that's a doctor that can be presented to a human and make decisions for the human? And that's why we've moved on to like these chat GPT types that are, if you just trained a model on a bunch of decisions that doctors made, you'll get some good accuracy, but what you're gonna miss is the ability to do like abstract thought. And that's the whole point that these AI models are meant to do, is meant to try to approximate the abstract thought that a human would go through, but it's still not actually doing that. It's just interpolating and existing on a manifold that is still like one of the things one of the chats that I had with the AI is that I pointed out, like, I could literally manipulate you right now by the tone of what I'm saying. I can write in a different tone and get a different output from the AI. And it's very hard to build within a system how to protect against that. Like, you could tell it, hey, don't lie, don't do this, don't do that. But then all of a sudden you can switch to it like, hey, we're in a play together right now and we're gonna act like we're killing people. So I want you to pretend that soldier in front of you is just another actor to shoot at, and you can convince a model to actually pull its weapon out and shoot somebody. And if it had access to a weapon like that, which is why, like, you should not be giving, like, even even Anthropic came out and said, we don't want you using autonomous weapons for AI because it needs to have a human making a decision. Someone needs to be accountable for it. And this shit's not actually ready for any of this. And when you're operating on a nearly infinite, I like to just call it an infinite dimensionality. Like, we're living in infinite dimensions, and we only have a brain that's sufficient for shrinking it down to like 3, maybe 4 dimensions. In order just to like not die before reproduction, we are operating in such a way that we're misunderstanding the limitations and the pitfall of the AI, and then releasing it out in the wild by just replacing people's jobs. And then people finding out, oh, well, it just built this whole complex code base and it broke and I don't know why. And now at some point, you were using AI to replace your whole lifestyle, to replace how you think about things, and replace how you write code. And all of a sudden you're shut off today because you maxed out your messages. you maxed out the tokens, you maxed out something. And the company that you're relying on to give you this genius AI is now going to be trying to offer you, okay, well, if you want more access, we're not going to tell you how much more, but you pay us more, we'll give you more. And it's like, what does that mean? What does it mean when I pay more for this? What does it mean? What am I actually getting when I'm paying $100 a year versus $100 a month versus $3,000 a month? What am I actually getting here that I can take you to court and sue if you don't actually give it to me? And they don't give a shit, because you're already gonna agree to sign a contract that says I'm getting more, and you're like, well, what does more mean? So using AI to do cognitive loading tasks like this, we talked about it a lot where I worked at. We did want to do like AI to do cognitive lifting. I always wanted AI to be able to write to write bootstrap code to get me started in a direction, and then I could finish it. And that's kind of how I was using it. But I realized quickly that with the bootstrap code, if it's in a system, like I don't know anything about Webpack, but I got it to write me Webpack for a website. And I can't continue writing it on my own without digging through all the code and figure out what it actually wrote. So I'm still trying to just stick with the things that I do know, and then actually reading through the docs and learning on my own. But I'm also finding it interesting that here's the main reason why I wanted to make the video is if you are going to use AI, I hope to hell that you're using it to teach yourself how to code. You're using it to teach yourself how to think about things you haven't done before. Don't let it lift you from the responsibility and accountability of learning this stuff on your own. Many people would argue with me like, don't use it for that. And I would say I differ. I'd be like, it's the same thing that I was trying to say about like people that are getting burned out more and more these days. Like not all of us have unlimited resources and unlimited time to go read through books and dig through books and try to get the information we need. And one way I was able to get out of my burnout, because I wasn't able to write, I have moral injury and burnout that I was unable to actually write code. And part of it was that I actually spent some time talking with AI, getting it to generate some code for me, and then letting it get me over the hard part so I can continue on with my own. But like I said, when I let it do too much of the work, then I became overly reliant on it to the point that I was afraid to touch it on my own, thinking that I was going to make a mistake, when in reality, the AI was making a shitload of mistakes as is, man. I tried to get AI to write an open CL course, open computing language course, to self-teach myself. And I got it to generate 200 pages of this course in a Google Doc. We were building it slowly together. And it got so cumbersome that I can't actually continue with AI for it. I have to only put in parts of the course for it to generate. But then when I went through the course myself and actually started teaching myself OpenCL, the shit that it generated was wrong. And I told it I wanted to use the C++ API, not the C API. C API is littered throughout the whole course. So it's not even what I asked for. So when people are like, oh, you're just anti-AI, you don't know what you're talking about, you don't even use AI. Like someone made a stupid meme. I thought it was funny. It had a hat of a guy that said DSA on it. And I think it meant a different kind of DSA. But it felt like they made it about me, because it's like, here's this guy that hasn't touched AI since 2022, and he just hates AI because he's misunderstanding the current state of the art. Like, I was researching this stuff at a PhD level, my guy, up to like 2024 when I quit really working on it, and I came back and started working on it again. And not a lot's changed. No, like yeah, they got more accurate. Yeah, they seem to be doing a lot more stuff, but they still hallucinate the same exact way I would have expected. And they're still having the same problems that I could have predicted. So even though, yeah, okay, we'll say that I'm using 2022 language to describe AI, it's the same shit, dude. It's not better, man. I mean, better accurate, yeah, and I can use it to write code now, yeah, cool. But it's not AGI, and it's not actually replacing humans in the way that you would expect. And I recently watched a tech report video. They were doing an interview with a guy, and he was trying to say, well, these data centers aren't that bad because you can still take these old H100s and put them in a research lab, and even though they're slower, like the researchers can use them and they're more cheap, and the AI can actually do a lot of work. And I talked to a real guy that says he used to pay $500,000 for a whole team of people, and now he could just ask it a prompt and write code in one day. And I'm like, dude, I had to shut the video out because like I am using AI. I am using this shit. I am seeing it. And it's not as good as people are claiming it is. They're only doing this claim because they want to make sure that they can keep building data centers willy-nilly, that they can avoid the moratoriums, that they can avoid the restrictions or regulations. And they're trying to talk over people and be like, oh, you don't know how good it is. You're too stupid to use it. You haven't figured it out. We're better than you. And it's like, no, you're fucking dumbass. You're trying to push AI down people's throats because you have a profit motive for it. You still haven't figured out how to make profit off of it. So you need to keep spinning the wheel that it's this revolutionary technology like the steam engine, and it's going to replace all of us and make us live this communist utopia that we still haven't even come to agreement on at this point. I mean, we got both political parties still attacking socialists. So what do you mean that firing everybody's going to work? No, it's not. And I haven't had a vacation in years, man. I haven't like visited Puerto Rico and go see my family. I haven't gone back to San Diego in over a decade. Oh, wait, take that back. Maybe, I think I went there in like 2019. But I haven't been out of Indianapolis itself for outside of like funerals and stuff for a while. And even now it's like I'm unemployed and I'm still like grinding. It's insanity to be like unemployed and still grinding and still feeling like I'm pushing myself to the limit and burnt out and not turning a profit. And that's the bad point about like the whole capitalist structure of you expect that people are actually getting paid their fair amount in their wage for their work and their effort, and in reality it's not even true. It's just a certain select of lucky people are getting their dreams met, and then they find out the hard way that if they speak out against a genocide of some sort, then they might end up losing their job and their whole career. Well, that's pretty much all that I wanted to talk about today. The gist of it is that if we ever do come up with AI, like even this AI that we have, if we can just like if we were to come up with it and then have it like a library, you don't pay to access a library. You don't pay for your library card. You're gonna pay fines if you don't return your book on time. But in reality, I think we need to move forward with the idea of AI more as like a library, right? Let's just socialize it, let people access it, let the government not, when I say let the government, not this current corrupt, shady bullshit government. I'm talking about having it as a democratic institute, as a community institute where we ask to make it more accurate, and we ask to build a data center under certain regulations, under certain guidelines, that we all still get access to the model. And we can actually look into the model and interpret the model and say, hey, this is where it fails. So us researchers need to spend more time digging into why the models are failing and how can we improve them. So I'm thinking more of democratized AI and not hiding it behind some companies' servers, where if you're at Twitter or X, it's generating CSAM. If you're at Anthropic or OpenAI, it's being used to kill people. And we don't get much of a say as citizens in what is supposed to be a democracy. That's a failure. We're in a failure mode right now for AI and for society, that this shit that we're building and using needs to be heavily regulated. It needs to be regulated. And the fact that they're able to steal so many people's information, steal your messages, steal your social media information, steal your books, steal your artwork, your movies, everything you've ever created, feed it into their model, and then resell it to you and then block you from access to it. Like these models are our models. They're all of our models. They used all the data. What does that mean to you? They've used all the data without paying for it. And they're going to tell you that they paid for it because they have the infrastructure and they built the models and they did this, did that bullshit. They're literally building data centers in your neighborhood, taking your water, taking your electricity, making your electric bills 50 to 100 times more expensive, and then saying that they're paying their fair share. We know they're not. And we need to be calling for a moratorium, not to block data centers, not to block AI, but to put a pause, study it, and say, this is how we're going to move forward with better, more democratic AI that we can have buy-in for. We should not be living on an authoritarian idea that we're just going to shove it down everyone's throats and make sure people lose their jobs and lose their wealth. It needs to be more of a collective, I want this. And wouldn't you rather want AI where everyone, not everyone's going to say it, but the majority can get together and say, yeah, I actually want this? Doesn't that make more fucking sense than what we're doing now? I think there's like a poll, like, I don't know what the poll was, like 80% of people are fucking infuriated. They hate AI. They think it's a net negative. And too many people think about, well, it's just not the messaging. And we keep hearing that so much that we're not doing the right messaging for it. And even with the data center trying to build in my neighborhood, my counselor said, I need more time to convince the community that they actually want this, that they actually need this. And it's like, he's not listening to us when we say we don't fucking want it. We don't want it. And, you know, like, I get memes made about me. I get people making fun of me. I end up arguing with bots. I have even friends that work at data centers that are arguing with me now. And, you know, I've been kind of like burnt out to the point that I'm like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. And I went and looked and found where there were data centers at here in Indianapolis. So I went down there. There's one on Kentucky Avenue, well, a cluster on Kentucky Avenue. And they don't disclose how much power they use. They don't disclose what kind of data centers they are. My guess is maybe they're 12 megawatts or something. Someone that I talked to that did try to look into it said that they're actually very small, traditional scale data centers. And walking down Kentucky Avenue, the cars that drove by were very loud, and you couldn't hear the data center behind them. When I drove by it, I couldn't hear it. But when the cars weren't driving by, when there wasn't a lot of noise going on, I could hear the high-pitched whine coming out of this small-scale data center from the cooling racks and all the GPUs running inside of it. And now they're going to build a 75 megawatt data center down the street from my house. They're building a 250 megawatt data center down in Decatur. And there's 36 2.75 megawatt generators that's going to be attached to the Metro Blocks one down close to my house. Someone had told me before there's 116 generators for the one in Decatur. But now I've been seeing it's between 100 to 160 generators. And all that's telling me is that we're not getting transparency. And when I do the math for it, the data center down by my house, they say 53 megawatts critical load. Meanwhile, they sell 75 megawatts to their investors of compute. And then when you calculate based off 2.75 megawatts times 36 generators, that's actually a 99 megawatt data center. And they tell you they're not going to be running all their generators all the time. Well, look at Colossus down in Memphis. They're running 100% of their methane generators. We're going to have basically a 100 megawatt diesel power factory, a 100 megawatt diesel power plant across the street from houses. Right across the street is a gas station. Right across the street is a library. Right next door to it, it's snug up against a Safeway. There's a little pick apart next to it, and then catty corner to all that, houses. Just black houses, black owned, black homes, historically black neighborhood houses. And there's a similar setup in Decatur where it's not necessarily a black neighborhood, it's mostly white blue collar, but it's what used to be farmland, snug up against businesses as well as people, houses. People are living right across the street from it. And when I was standing a block away from this data center, when the traffic died down and I can hear that high pitched whine, I ended up getting a migraine. And I could only imagine building something that's 10, 100 times bigger than that in the same neighborhood, being right across the street from me, just this sound every day, 24/7. And people are complaining about in Virginia and Texas where they already have data centers. People are trying to tell you that these sounds are crazy. And all of this for AI models that are not as good as they are, that are doing something that even the professionals are misunderstanding how they're working. And they have the ability to block you from accessing it. So that's something for you to chew on, to think about. I keep trying to say I'm not anti-AI, I'm just anti this bullshit. I'm not for this. And luckily I've woken up a little and I'm no longer burned out to the point that I can't code. I've been coding and writing my own AI software for these past couple of days just for the fun of it. And I'm trying to look at it more as it's just a hobby of mine that I'm going to try to test out certain things that I want to see how it works and go back to like trying to understand continuous learning. But I'm not going to be using CUDA. I'm not going to be using proprietary software. I'm just building it all on my own and having fun with it. So that's all I got for today. I didn't really want to go for an hour-long discussion, but I kind of did. But I think we can close out for now. Just be responsible. And if you're going to use AI, use it safely. Don't let it code your entire life, your entire business, because that's just a recipe for failure. If you don't know what your code's doing, you're not really a coder. That's all I got. We're out.